And that conversation starts right now. The hashtag is NBS Frontline. Go to your Twitter handles, keep the questions and comments and as well as observations coming. What will you remember the 10th Parliament for? My panel this evening, the Honorable Peter Ogwang, State Minister for ICT and Member of Parliament elect for Ngariam constituency, serving MP for Usuk County, counting down to the last few days. Welcome to the Frontline, Honorable. Next to him is the Honorable Muhammad Mwanga Chivumbi, serving Democratic Party Member of Parliament. For the remaining few days, he will be coming in as Member of Parliament on the NUP ticket, representing Butambala County. Welcome to the Frontline, Honorable. And right next to Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi is the Honorable Sarah Opendi Acheng, Woman MP, Tororo District. She will be handing over to herself for the same seat. She's also the State Minister in charge of minerals. And right next to her is her voter, Mr. Ofono Opondo Podel, the Executive Director, Uganda Government Media Center and Government Spokesman. Thank you, and the Frontline as well. And it's been long. Welcome back to the Frontline, Honorable David Pulkol. He's now Executive Director of the African Leadership Institute. Welcome, gentlemen and ladies, to tonight's edition of the Frontline. We'll be dedicating the next 2 hours to walking down the memory lane and examining the legacy of the 10th Parliament. But before we get there, there's a story that just came in this evening. It's now confirmed that the Prime Minister, Dr. Ruakana Rugunda, has written to the Speaker of Parliament, I should say the outgoing Speaker of Parliament, asking that the Parliamentary Commission meets to consider postponing elections of the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker of Parliament that has been scheduled for the 21st of this month. I'll start with the Minister of ICT. Is that the government position?
First of all, I would like to confirm the statement which the Right Honourable Prime Minister has written to the Right Honourable Speaker. It's true. If you look at the parliamentary calendar, if you look at the parliamentary program which has been written, it gives no time for political parties to sit and caucus and come up with a position of their own parties in terms of who becomes a speaker or who becomes a deputy speaker. For instance, for purpose of swearing in program given out, I am meant to swear in on what? On 20th. And if you look at the parliamentary calendar which has come out, it's giving me on 21st, it makes the first business of Parliament, that is election of the Speaker and Deputy Speaker. For that matter, it is true we did agree that we communicate to the Right Honourable Speaker. It's true we did agree, we asked the Right Honourable Speaker to give parties time to have 1 or 2 days in between there for them to caucus and come up with a position which they will then carry forward on who becomes the Speaker. So for that matter, I confirm to the letter written by the Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I think that by 12th of May, the only elected leader in this country, duly sworn in, will be the President of the Republic. What powers then, where do the Speaker and the Prime Minister, outgoing in this context, derive the powers to make such a decision?
If you all recall, the letter has just come out today, and as of now, we have the position of the Speaker of the Parliament of the Republic of Uganda. So for that matter, we have asked her before the office of the President is sworn in on 12th. So that means that they must come up with a position to arrange the program for swearing in of the incoming members of Parliament. And we are only asking her now as a position, in the position on her capacity as the Speaker of the Republic of Uganda.
All right, Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi, your take on that developing story?
First of all, it shows you the level of preparedness of our institutions and a fair sense of immaturity. In mature democracies, these positions are more or less sorted before even you go to the polls. The Republican Party is so sure of who will be the Speaker in case the Republican Party attains the majority. So is the Democratic Party. They also have a president. So in so many democracies, parties are organized in such a way that these things are predictable. You know by virtue of hierarchy, you know by virtue of experience, and if you are to organize elections for the Speaker, why in the eve? So much as the Speaker is going to be elected by members of Parliament, these should be informed choices. You abolish the campaigns, I hear, from NRM side. Says you cannot canvass. Now, do I speak for myself or I must voice the opinion of the people of Butambala on who should be the Speaker? And therefore, even 2 days is not adequate enough because, as you know, MPs are going to go for parties. After swearing in, they are going to go merrymaking across their constituencies, and some coming from Karamoja will not have the time to travel back to Karamoja, even if you give them 2 days. So they will still stay in Kampala and have this opinion. So, I mean, NRM should style up.
Thank you. Honorable Sarah Opendi, your take on this development?
Well, my take is, first of all, we should know that it's not the first time we're electing a speaker and a deputy speaker. The parties have previously been caucusing, and immediately after the swearing-in ceremony, the members of parliament are called and the election takes place. However, I think this particular election has, we are caught up in these COVID times. And this is why you have even seen that the swearing-in ceremony will take a number of days. I think there are 4 days. And with limited numbers coming in to swear. But also the number of members of parliament has increased. So I think there was no time for us. Maybe the ideal time should have been when we were in Chankwanzi. But when the other team was in Chankwanzi, the NRM, the new members of parliament, but we had to complete our obligation, which is to complete business, which was already scheduled, but also the budget process, which we had to complete. So I think the letter has been written to the speaker. The decision will be made by the commission. I think that's all I can say on this matter.
All right, David, let's hear your take on that.
Wow, I think it's, first of all, a wrong address. The letter's been posted to a wrong place because then, after that period that she's being asked to organize, is already injury time. The game has ended. The last whistle has been blown. So that letter should have been addressed to the clerk of parliament. There's always a clerk. She's the administrator of that house, accountable to. Now, the honesty that determines that this letter deserves is that Right Honorable Speaker should technically disqualify herself and give this letter to the clerk or advise those who wrote so that the matter is addressed, handled by those who have no interest in that position of being elected. So you declare your interest and also declare your powerlessness and therefore allow the institutions to take full charge who are apolitical and therefore allow then fair play on all the other parties to caucus if they so wish and therefore bring into the field their best players whom they want to front for this position. So I think the Prime Minister needs to be advised and also the Right Honourable Speaker needs to be addressed. The public is watching. The Right Honourable Speaker, or now, needs to be advised. Well, unit within Parliament, we should really advise, and there's a whole Attorney General which needs to advise here. So for me, it's not a crisis. If a letter came to me as David Polkol, who is just Executive Director of AFRI, I mean, I must declare and say, look, wait a minute, I'm not the one supposed to handle this, in all honesty. So, and secondly, if you have interest in that job, and you may not want the parties to caucus, so you will undermine and sabotage the caucusing because of your self-interest. So in a mature democracy, you must declare your interest. And also, you don't give yourself powers you don't have. Otherwise, you'll be acting in false pretense, or what do they call it in law? The lawyers are here. So I think that matter is dead on arrival.
All right, finally, your take on that.
Well, there's a precedent, like Honorable Acheng has said, Opendi, who have elected members of parliament, sworn them, and they proceeded to elect a speaker. I need to cross-check how many days into 16 were members of parliament given, after being sworn in, to caucus, and then they convene to elect the speaker. I need to cross-check that. But be that as it may, I want to believe that the Prime Minister has written the letter in honesty, in good faith, for 3 reasons. One, the outgoing government, the executive, the legislature, which is Parliament, the district councils, are supposed to prepare transitional businesses for the incoming government. The current cabinet has made decisions how the first few weeks or months, the things that will happen. This current parliament has passed is passing a budget for the next government, the next financial year. And so I think if this is meant to smoothen the transition from this parliament to the next parliament, and particularly the leadership, I would have no quarrels with it. I hope the Speaker, and I want to believe that the commission, the Parliamentary Commission, has powers to determine the successive business for the next parliament. In any case, I think in the rules of procedure, the current parliament can even save certain bills, for example, for the incoming parliament. So I think there is a legal ground upon which this can be done. But like David has said, Paul and Cole has said, the executive and the NRM.
Call could have multiple meanings.
Yes, the executive, the NRM, needed to act the other day, so that we don't write letters as if we have just woken up to the reality that the numbers of members of parliament is high. We have staggered ceremonies for swearing in. We knew long ago after members of parliament were elected on 14th that we have 527 members to be sworn in, and it's going to be staggered. And so we shouldn't have written this letter as if we have just woken up to the reality. And so really it is kind of indictment, in my view, on how the executive conducts business. We need to do much better.
All right, thank you. We have a former commissioner of parliament here. How has a situation like this arisen before? How then does the commission deal with it?
First of all, I would like to clarify and make again my point hard. Number one, we did agree that the parliamentary calendar for swearing in of the incoming members of parliament does not give room for political parties to caucus to determine on the candidates they have, if at all they have. I want to address myself to the NRM, which I support. As NRM, we have candidates who have shown interest for the office of Speaker, who are 2. As NRM, we have candidates who have shown interest in the office of the Deputy Speaker, who are almost about 5, 6. For that matter, we have a stake in the incoming parliament, which is the 11th parliament. So we did say, can we ask the administration of parliament now, because they have come up with a program for swearing in. For that matter, they have not given parties any room to consult each other on who they nominate to be candidates in the floor of parliament. So I want to speak as far as I'm concerned as a member of NRM. So, and I want to ask my colleagues here, there is no problem with what the Right Honourable Prime Minister has done, because he has written to the Speaker of Parliament, who is still a sitting Speaker, up to 12th. I'm a minister, up to 12th. I will wait for handover when a new government is formed. That's the position I have. Even Right Honourable Kadaga remains as a Speaker up to 12th. If she's elected or not elected, she will wait to hand over office. So for that matter, as far as caucusing is concerned, that letter of the Prime Minister is concerned, that's okay. Number 2, it is true the Parliamentary Commission is the one which determines the business of Parliament, because they are the top organ. And you remember who are the members of the Commission? My brother, Honourable Chivumbi. The Leader of Opposition is a member of the Parliamentary Commission. The Right Honourable Prime Minister is a member of the Commission. The Minister for Finance is a member of the Commission. 3, 4 backbencher commissioners are members of the Commission. So for that matter, This matter should be discussed at the commission, and that's why the Prime Minister has written as a matter of urgency, because how many days do we have to? 12. So they must sit, and there's a provision for the Speaker to call emergency commission meeting, which notice is given in terms of 1 day for purposes of that meeting to take place. It's provided for in the Administration of Parliament Act. I thank you.
Honorable Mwanga, does that settle your doubts?
First of all, we have rules of procedure. And I don't fully agree with the Honorable Procure, even the assessment of the analysis of my brother here. Parliament does not get dissolved when they were writing the Constitution. In Uganda, Parliament is never dissolved. I think that was a radical departure, because the executive used to have powers to dissolve Parliament. The Obote had them, Amin had them, and the other things. To suspend the Constitution and dissolve Parliament. Now,
You didn't need even to suspend the Constitution. The sitting president, at least in Obote 2 and Obote 1, had constitutional power to dissolve Parliament because we had borrowed the House of Commons type, where the Prime Minister has powers to dissolve Parliament when he so or she so wishes.
so in the CA, they found a cure for that. I said, for better and worse, Uganda cannot live any single day without Parliament.
So your salaries are paid up to the end of May. Yeah.
So that's why the salaries are paid up to the end of when the other Parliament is sworn in. 2, Parliament is independent of the executive. Its term does not end necessarily with the term of the executive. So it's the judiciary. Well, the tenure of Parliament is paged on the tenure of the president. That's the other dilemma in our law, is that the tenure of Parliament is paged on the tenure of the president. That's why it was very difficult for members of Parliament to give themselves 7 years, because by extension, they needed to
They had
also...
actually given it to themselves.
They needed also to go to a referendum and extend the tenure of the president.
That's why they were caught in court. They had given it to
so they found it very difficult to steal because of what the procurers have done. Now, the legal mass need to be informed. When does one cease to be a speaker then? Okay? Is it when the other parliament gets sworn in? Or is it when the president gets sworn in? And when does the Right Honorable Speaker Kadaga and Jacob Olanya cease to be speakers of Parliament? So, but the rules of procedure, I think, I did not read through them, speak to that and their provisions. But the bigger issue here, legal gymnastics notwithstanding, is how, you see, you have a government that has been in place for 35 years. They have done this over and over again. They've just burnt, the NRM has just burnt, I guess, public money for 2 to 3 weeks in Chankwanzi with the so-called caucus. What then stopped them from caucusing on this matter? Has any party other than NRM complained that it is not ready to have a speaker? So why should a government that has been handing over from itself to itself for 35 years not be ready on day one to be ready to conduct official business?
I think all wants to take that.
I just want to correct
Really?
Honorable Mwanga Kivumbi.
That speaks that you rig
For a
directions.
member of parliament who has lived there for 10 years,
Not 10 years, I've been there 7 years. Sir,
you
came through by election.
shouldn't be making submission on guesswork, that you guess that NRM used public money in Chankwanzi. You should be speaking facts. If you have facts, please table them so then we know NRM used money from state coffers. It didn't.
And as a parliament, you vote money for that institution,
Secondly,
the
group that spent 3 weeks in Chankwanzi was not the NRM parliamentary caucus. It was newly elected members of parliament. It doesn't become a parliamentary caucus until they have taken oath of members of parliament. That's just the clarification. The
So,
legal
so
point
let-
here,
let's
I
get,
want to-
yes,
Allow me
Honorable.
just to make this statement. That the commission sat and came up with that, that program. And of course, in the commission were our representatives. I believe it was an oversight on their part, maybe.
Quite a clumsy one.
It was,
because, the Right Honourable Prime Minister sits in that commission. The government chief whip is in there. The finance minister is in there. So
well, I strongly believe that.
I think it's time to give them really a medal of clumsiness on this particular matter.
But just also what I wanted to say, whatever, just what I wanted to say, that the Speaker and Deputy Speaker for the 11th Parliament, I already know.
I don't know.
You don't know?
No, I don't.
But they're already written in heaven. So whatever we do,
we are playing on earth.
we are playing on us, but they already know. Yes, whatever we do,
Honourable Pendi,
the
you're ahead of
Speaker
us.
and the Deputy Speaker already know.
Oh, believes there's no heaven. So then,
He's the president.
Honorable Pendi plays politics on earth.
yes.
Let us wait when there's time for heaven.
Everything is
Then
written
we
in
discover
heaven. Yes.
whether there's heaven or not.
It is there.
And we
All
play
right,
the politics
I wanted us to focus on the issues. First, let's look at the parliamentary timeline, the report that was, the date that was set by the Prime Minister and his team in the commission. So between 17th and 20th, we'll be swearing in of MPs, and the election of the Speaker is supposed to be on the 21st. The race really zeroing down between the gentleman and the lady there, the heat vibrating across. So the person who has written the letter was in that meeting, I want to believe, that approved that. Honorable Pendi says it's oversight. That's what it's looking like until probably the commission meets and decides to the contrary. That's what we have on record. Every parliament rises and falls on its leadership, and that's the parameter we're going to start our conversation tonight on. In regard to the steering of business in the 10th Parliament, did the Speaker and Deputy live to the billings of the country, to the expectations of what a Speaker should be? And I know that David Pulkol and his AFLI team have been doing a comprehensive study on the performance of that Parliament. I'll start with you on that matter. Did the leadership do their bit? Did they do what is expected of a Speaker and a Deputy Speaker in the 5 years that they have been in charge of the House?
Wow. Yes, they steer the House. And I think in my view, when we looked at I'm only using just a snapshot, an X-ray report we took in the 3rd year of Parliament, because we have embargoed the 4th year and the 5th year, which is we are finalizing. That will be released later for purpose of learning and teaching and lessons learning. But when I pick from that 1 year out of the 5 years, certainly it performed at an average of 60%. But then, of course, when you look at legislation, when you look at oversight, when you look at appropriation, when you look at representation, the scores are different. So for those who steer that House, it's good, not very good, not very excellent performance. You know what that 60% means. It's good. And I think they need to be congratulated. So for me, there are highs and lows. Okay, there are areas where we need to commend the 10th Parliament and need to congratulate them. But there are areas where they did very poorly. There are areas where they did fairly. And I hope we shall go into that discussion.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
In regard to leadership and giving direction for the House, how would you rate the leaders of the 10th Parliament?
Well, what were the leaders of Parliament supposed to do? The Speaker and Deputy, the chairpersons of committees. They were supposed to ensure that Parliament sits to conduct its ordinary business. What's the ordinary business of Parliament? 1, to do legislation. 2, to do appropriation. 3, oversight and representation. Let's go to the major legislation. I have been looking at the last 4 years. I was seeing, on average, every month, Parliament was passing 9 to 12 bills into law. Don't mind that some of the bills had stayed in Parliament for 2, 3, 4 years. But when they begin, when the committees make a report, that has been the rate. In a month, in a year, they do about 12. I think that's relatively commendable. In my view, it translates to about 70% in terms of legislation. On appropriation plus legislation, particularly passing the budget, I think we have not had any single time when the budget, which is a major tool of implementation of government programs, has been passed late, beyond the time scale we have not had in the last 5 years. In terms of representation, I think they have given members of parliament opportunity to be heard, to raise issues, never mind how superfluous those issues are, but they have been able, the leadership has been able to give members of parliament a voice in the country. And remember, midway, I think 2017, they began this outreach program where they go to the constituencies, to the field, in terms of inspection, in terms of letting the public know what parliament is. The fourth area is oversight. They have not been very effective in oversight because I think along the way they got diverted in terms of resources, use of resources, sometimes pettiness, because when you have a situation where the Speaker of Parliament, from now what we know, the relationship with the Deputy is not excellent, is not functional. The Deputy Speaker hasn't been allowed to chair a sitting of Parliament. I think that's the lower point. In terms of the other leaders, because the Speaker and Deputy Speaker are not the only leaders in Parliament, they are committee chairpersons and deputy. Particularly in the last 1 year, I think the performance of committees and even the sitting have been good. I think on account of COVID, they are not traveling as previously, because you remember previously we had situations where Parliament couldn't sit on account of the absence of the Speaker having traveled, Deputy Speaker also having traveled. Committees, the issue was of quorum was perennial, lack of quorum, but I think in the last 1 year, it has been good, in spite of the SOP of limiting the actual number of members of Parliament in the House in attendance. I think the last 1 year has been very good. In terms of democracy, consolidating, making sure that Parliament gets its space vis-à-vis the executive, vis-à-vis the judiciary, vis-à-vis the civil society. I think the leadership of Parliament has made Parliament relatively independent and assertive. And again, I want to say, never mind, even when sometimes they abuse the authority, I think they have helped grow the independence and assertiveness of Parliament as an institution.
Okay.
That to accuse this Parliament of being, for example, I hear civil society accusing Parliament of being a rubber stamp. I think it would be grossly unfair to accuse this Parliament of being a rubber stamp, even when it is overwhelmingly dominated by one party. It's a Parliament that holds the executive to account, it's a Parliament that holds the judiciary, holds society. But I suspect that some of the accusation is really to make civil society be the alternative to particularly donor funding, because if they were to concede that Parliament is doing its work, then there would perhaps not be much use for the civil society, especially in the area of governance and accountability.
Thank you. Honorable Pendi, one of the disturbing things, especially in the early years of the 10th Parliament, was perennial absenteeism of members of the front bench. I remember a number of occasions when the parliamentary sitting had to be suspended because ministers went AWOL. Let's speak to that. What was happening back end? What went wrong?
You're asking me a question that...
because you sit with these people, the ones who
yes,
are
I
missing.
sit with them, but I am not the whip, neither am I the leader of government business. But I want to really admit that the issue of the absenteeism is a serious matter. And it was not only the front bench, but even members of parliament. Because ideally, we are all supposed to be in the house from 2 to whatever time parliament ends. But if you look at, well, the front bench, people were absent, sometimes doing other official work, I believe. But also that should not be an excuse, because we all know that there is business in parliament in the afternoon. And all ministries have at least more than one minister. So the arrangement should be that you may all not be there, at least one minister should be present. But that happened. I hope as we get into the 11th parliament, we shall not see that happening again. I really want to believe that the 11th parliament will be different, both for the front bench and the back benchers, but also on the opposition side. You know, you look more at the government side and saying the ministers are not there. But there are also shadow ministers on the other side who must be present when parliament is sitting. But even the front bench on the opposition has been absent. You would find only one person or two, or even at some point none at all. So the issue, but generally the issue of absenteeism is a serious matter, and we really need to crack the whip. Because now with 529 members of parliament, there may be people who may never even step in that house. And work is done by just maybe 100 only, which is very, very unfortunate, because during election time, people campaign, decampaign others, you unseat people and promise to come and do better. When you get to parliament, you do the opposite. So I hope that looking at the turnover of the members of the 10th parliament, I hope those who are coming in should learn a lesson that you are voted to come and legislate, do oversight, represent your people, appropriate. I hope they will do their work.
All right. Honorable Mwanga, from the comments of the minister there, your side of the front bench as well has copied and pasted the practice on the other side. You take on that.
I think she was fairly politicking. I know she has an interest in our side. So,
would you want to declare that interest?
No, not for this forum.
All right,
this is not the right forum. So she keeps watch.
Could be the other way around.
Oh, maybe the other way around. So it is for that matter. But on a serious note, the ordinary functions of parliament, which is legislation, appropriation, oversight, any parliament.
Also exemplary leadership.
Eh?
The country is looking for exemplary leadership.
Leadership
from you.
and role
You have a
modeling
code of conduct.
and giving
Disciplinary committee.
everything. You'd say any parliament would score 60%. David has been scoring parliaments. If you compare the region, even under extreme dictatorship, they would actually score fairly more. They would pass laws. They would, even the apartheid parliament did all those kind of things. So parliament are ordinarily not defined. The overall history will not define this parliament by those other parameters. This parliament will be defined singularly on how it conducted itself in Tojikwatako. And history will judge this parliament by simply that. Because everything else, there was a transformational moment. There was a matter that would transcend what other parliaments don't do. So how did we conduct ourselves in that kind of environment? I don't care which side carried the majority.
Is that true?
By the way, I don't. But I cared about the transactional nature of that business. And I will leave it for leaving Parliament not naked. I will use only those words. And I think it was the lowest moment that I will ever see a member of Parliament to go through. Not the beating. The beating humiliates those who beat. I mean, those who have the heart to beat. But when you look, if history goes back dot by dot, comma by comma, letter by letter, how we arrived at that decision, it would be the lowest moment for any of us to look at and say, was I part of that mess? And for me, it's because of the transactional nature of that decision. If people believed in it at heart and carried out a decision, well and good. But for them to transact, and there is a quid pro quo.
I thought we were talking about the leadership.
No, that's why I said I was using words that I didn't want to call to understand.
All right. I think we'll get into the details.
And there was a
we will unpack.
and there was a quid pro quo.
We'll look at
for members of Parliament for a defining moment in history. That really, we single-handedly, all these other things we talk about, average legislation, blah, 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 all parliaments do. That's the ordinary work of Parliament. But a parliament, like a generation, is defined by how it conducts itself during that unique moment that will define that generation. And me and him, and by the way, we will be judged holistically. They will not even single out that, you see, Chivumbi was exceptional. They'll say, but that parliament is the one that did this. So really, for me, that is the other point that we shall look at is how this parliament has ended up allowing the executive to accumulate this debt, where every Ugandan now has got 1.5 million shillings on his head. It will take us now 93 years.
I think you're running ahead of us. Let's talk about that when we focus on it. I think because it's one of the highlights of the 10th Parliament. Honorable Ogwang, you have the burden of speaking for the government. And then some of the bad manners witnessed in Parliament was the frosty relationship between a section of the executive and the leadership of Parliament. Those baby quarrels on the floor certainly distracted business, didn't they?
First of all, I am very happy today I'm here with my very good friend, Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi. Surprisingly, when I was in Parliament, before I went to executive, we were in the same committee of budget. Now, this assertion and the narrative they have driven for long in terms of the constitutional amendment. Honorable Chivumbi, today, I want you to address yourself to Article 259 of the Constitution. You know, sometimes we forget, as if the framers of this Constitution did not put a provision for the Constitution to be amended. And that's what beats me and pains me, when a colleague of mine begins to push that narrative, as if a Constitution cannot be amended. Actually, for me, I want to put also on record, I am happy I participated in the Parliament, in the 10th Parliament, which amended the Constitution. So, Honorable Chivumbi, 2, the narrative of you attempting to portray those who supported the amendment of the Constitution as being those who sold the country, in my opinion, is wrong. Our roles are to legislate. What I did and what many of us did was within the constitutional mandate why we are elected.
The money part wasn't in the Constitution.
The money part, I am coming to the money part.
Yes.
You know, it is good to come here and allege, but it's also important you prove it. Because it's, no, I'm coming to address that.
Yes.
It's an insult to me. And to the men, I'm happy the minister is also there. If she was procured, let her say it. But I know this is the politics, which our friends have always Continue.
For the sake of record, for the sake of fact,
Yes.
was there money given to NRM MPs around that time?
I did not receive money, and there was no member of parliament of NRM who got money at that time.
Honorable Gwang.
I am being honest to
national
you.
record.
Yes, I am. Because if there is anyone who received money, let him come and declare. Because it is also not good for me to come here and begin
Do you
to say
remember
I received
money
the money.
that a section of opposition MPs returned to the House?
As far as I'm concerned, they should be made to prove who gave them that money. For me, I didn't.
It came from Parliament.
No, I didn't. The money which Parliament gave us was specifically money to go and consult, which came through the mainstream Parliamentary Commission budget. I was a member of the commission. That money was appropriated.
So let's
by the
examine that
taxpayer.
fact. Let's examine that fact. A member of Parliament gets mileage.
Yes,
A member of Parliament is facilitated to do their job.
yes.
So what was that 20 million for?
First of all, I want also to put this on record. The specific Article 102 did not require me to go and consult my population.
So what was the money?
That's why now, you remember, if you go to the parliamentary answer, the speaker, when she was making her ruling, she said, please, I want to ask you, I'm adjourning this house, make sure that you go and consult your people, even when the law did not permit. So the question is, as far as I'm concerned as a parliamentary commission, that specific work for that specific time, because I knew it was like any other ordinary bill, which comes in, we discuss it, we pass it.
So why did you appropriate money?
So-
You were a member of the commission.
So I'm coming now to talk about the appropriation of money for the consultation.
Yes.
Now, when the speaker made such a pronouncement, true, we said now, first of all, we need to go and meet at least a certain percentage of the population. Because it's not like any other bill. You go and say, like the speaker did say, go and consult. So when I go to my constituency, normally I'm given mileage, which mileage drives me to Katakwe. Normally I must call a population of how many people. I must be able to facilitate with a drink and get the views of these people. Personally, I moved to all the 12 sub-counties I was representing. On top of that, I consulted various structures. I had open meetings. So for God's sake, I did not plan budget for those MPs to do that work. So I don't want us here to look at the office of a member of parliament as a procuring officer. No, we must have the respect and decorum for that office. So for me,
Does procurement happen in Parliament?
first of all, there's a clerk to parliament who is the head of the technical team. Parliament has roles and parliaments work
No, I'm
with
talking about this procurement that the Honorable Mwanga
I am
was
not
referring-
aware.
Not the one in the
I
law
am not aware. Maybe for Honorable Chivumbi, who he is a member of the opposition. I want to be honest. That's why I'm saying I'm happy today. He's my friend and a brother. And we have been there. I think I came earlier than him. He joined me there. But the good thing, we are very close. That's why I want to
So Honorable Chimbe, I think it's fair that you tell us the procurement, the process, how it was done, so that we leave the records clear.
No, that's why I say.
But before Honorable Chivumbi
Yes.
speaks, I think let me say something following what Honorable Gwang has said. Remember this particular article, 102B, was a controversial matter. And there was a lot of, the population was speaking like they were the ones who were supposed to be making that decision. So based on that, the members said we cannot continue to sit and debate and pass this amendment without consulting the population. It came from the members. So because of that, the speaker had to consult the commission and they came up with a figure of 29 million, which I did receive. And all members of parliament received that money. That's true. I went and consulted. And of course, when you consulted, tried to convince them if you had a position, and if they insisted that please go and do this, this is what you were expected to come and do. My people, for instance, agreed with me, because for me, I did not consult NRM members only. I consulted because all my voters cut across. We have FDC.
I don't know whether it was a consultation or talking at the
No,
voters.
no. I consulted.
Most of the MPs I saw were talking at the voters.
I
and
consulted
then telling
the
them what-
voters. I had FDC members, and one FDC young man said, Minister, we have heard from you. We have given our views. That particular clause is going to catch up with their leader, Besigye. So go and amend it, but reinstate term limits. And that's what I did. On the floor, remember, I was very specific on that matter.
All right,
I think I'm the only one who opposed the issue of, first of all, the extension, and even the issue of reinstating term limits. I was very clear on that on the floor.
All right, thank you.
I think
yes.
a matter like this, evidence was adduced in court sitting in Mbale, and court made a ruling. Was there a consultation? You had the judges, the justices submit whether there was a consultation or no consultation, whether that consultation was structured or not. You saw cameras, you saw people struggling over food, over what, in different constitutions. It took different dimensions. But anyway, the matter has been put to rest. If you want, you go and read the ruling on this matter. And I think for me, no appeal, nothing. It stands as a record of court on this matter. So let's really stop pulling any ropes here. I think it's just put to rest for now. But if you go, if you ask me, if you could just allow me to why we think that the 10th Parliament deserves to, if you like, from the legislation side of things, how independent has the 10th Parliament been?
But before that,
I really want to unpack, and then you can discuss
I was
with evidence.
supposed to make a response. You
All right,
see,
let's listen to him, then we'll
Yeah,
get to
Mr.
the
Paul.
particular issues. Yes.
When we are building a nation and we want to help this country, there are things we can't bury. And as we are asking another parliament, there will be parliaments after us. Even perceptions in politics need to be addressed.
Yeah. Reality may be different. Perception may be important, yeah.
Perception may be important. You can't convince any Ugandan, even if those that vote you, sir, my good friend. The common denominator in Uganda is that this decision was a transaction.
Oh.
You may...
I heard the speaker say that if it were not for her at some point, Mr. Museveni would now be, you remember the transaction? I heard.
The transaction.
The transaction. And then the president says, I did not need anybody's support. So please, let's just leave this matter.
No, I don't want to.
It is in the public court.
Disagreeing on the definition of transaction.
I'm sorry.
Now the definition of transaction takes minutes.
It's a transaction because if a whole honorable speaker says that if she did not move that amendment, if she did not
Someone would be in
over it,
Rwakitura.
that somebody would now be languishing in Rwakitura. Okay? Now, first of all, we do, not everybody can agree, but that shows that there was a business. And the other one says, I don't know, so she needs to be taken to task over this matter. What did you mean, Right Honorable? Okay, please, back to you.
Let's take a
Back
break.
to you. I'm reading too much.
All right.
Yeah, okay.
So the question is that the public out there think there was a transaction. And I'm using that word deliberately.
You're the one making them think so.
Deliberately, that there was a transaction.
I'm trying to look at my dictionary to understand this. The meaning of transaction.
At one time, the Deputy Speaker, Honorable Olanya, said, the business of Parliament is transact.
To transact business of Parliament.
So there was a transaction.
There was a businesswoman. There was a businessman.
So I don't know why he's taking offense with the ordinary work of Parliament, which is to transact.
I have confirmed the money we appropriated for the presentation.
So there was a transaction.
All right.
And seriously, many MPs in the last election, that was the most defining question in the population. As they were campaigning, no, you are speaking, what was the attrition rate? Quite one of the key issues, especially in the region which I know very well, was whether you transacted on behalf of the people of Uganda or you transacted on behalf of the president.
Know of MPs who did not support the age limit, who lost in Buganda.
There are quite few.
Yes.
I'll be fair, there are quite few. There are quite few, and I know them as you do.
Yes.
So, what's the lowest moment of this parliament? And truth be told, Honorable, that's why for us in the Muslim, God will not allow people to speak on the day of judgment. Because when they speak, they lie. He will allow your legs to say, on this day I walked here, your hands will say, on this day I handled this. Everything, every joint will speak for itself. And on those days, the joints will speak where you walked and what you carried.
Thank you. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll now look at the parameters on which to score the parliament. Away from the transactions, but all that after the break.
NBS Frontline.
All right, gentlemen and lady, welcome back. Let's transact business in the remaining hours of the frontline. We're going up to the top of the hour of midnight, so we have 1 hour of transactions to do tonight. We're looking at the legacy of the 10th Parliament. My panel this evening, the Honorable Peter Ogwang, the Honorable Muhammad Mwanga Chivumbi, the Honorable Sarah Opendi, Mr. Ofono Opondo Podel, and the Honorable David Pulkol. All right, during the break, a good citizen sent me a very interesting article of the Constitution, which I think touches on what we started with, an Article 95. It talks about the sessions of Parliament and says, where a new Parliament is elected, the President shall, by proclamation, appoint the place and a date not beyond 7 days after the expiry of the term of Parliament or of the extended period, as the case may be, for the first sitting of the new Parliament. And the second part of that says, a session of Parliament shall be held at such a place in Uganda and shall commence at such a time as the Speaker by proclamation appoints. So it looks like we're not playing very much outside the laws in regard to, I think there's a 7 days target to be, so let's see what the Commission decides in that regard. David, you'll start us off on,
Okay.
on the question of appropriation.
Appropriation.
Yes, how the 10th Parliament fared. During this Parliament, I am disorganizing your notes, but I know why.
No problem.
I know I want to start there. It is during this Parliament that we had a minister who became to be known as the minister in charge of borrowing. And our debt burdens hit astronomical figures. Government says it is intended to set the foundation for our growth and future prosperity. Let's look at your books, your research. How did it score? Yes.
So on appropriation, in the third year, they scored 53.4% on appropriation. But that's the third year. So we were asking, how independent is Parliament from the executive during the budgeting process? So, and for us, we say sometimes Cabinet writes to Parliament to bring about changes in the budget that is already originally, things which are not in the budget framework. But what we found out was that the Budget Committee and the Economic Committee of Parliament was well attended, 66%, the most well attended by members of Parliament. Secondly, they took leadership in scrutinizing the budget. They're excellent. In making good recommendations, they are very good. But when it comes to approval, they just turn around the very recommendations they made. For example, if you find 60% of the ministries, departments, agencies, including local governments, have not aligned their budgets to the National Development Plan 2, which the Public Finance and Management Act says they should. So they still went ahead, nonetheless, to pass those budgets, which PSS, CAOs have not aligned their budgets to the National Development Plan. So what are you implementing? So if you go ahead to approve, for example, a budget which is not aligned, and this is a plan to take us to 2040. So you begin to see that although they did the good thing, but by violating the very Finance Act, which is an act of Parliament, why should Parliament pass a law which they don't obey themselves, which they violate themselves? So another area to watch about, like for example, you find that in an election year or towards an election, so the Public Finance Act and Management Act required that the supplementary budget, for example, is tagged to a certain contingency fund and a percentage of the budget. It was there in the law, 2015 Act, but 6 months down the road, before the 2016, for example, you find that that part is removed. So the way the supplementary budgets have abused the powers of Parliament, anytime, any day. If you look at the last one in October last year, for example, 551 billion just for State House classified expenditure. You begin to see programs that are not in the budget, ghetto, something for initiative. You begin to see venture fund. You begin to see agriculture. You begin to see projects that are not okay, and you find to distort the budget. And you begin to see in the supplementary expenditure things which are foreseen, which could have been planned and budgeted for. Somehow they show up. So supplementary budgets have become budgets within budgets. It distorts the budgeting process. And I hope actually that we take note of this. So again, the requirement under, I have talked about that requirement in that act. It's also noted that from the financial year 2016-2017, the budget of classified expenditure has grown from 441 billion to 3.6 trillion as of 2021. Classified. So certain things which don't need to be classified. What's classified about fuel? What's classified about, I've run classified expenditure as Director General of External Security. Very little. What's classified about stationery? About salaries? You can even put code names if you want, but allow the auditing to take place so that the one who budgets should not be the one who spends, should not be the one who accounts. At least you can audit the processes. You can even get a senior army officer, a lieutenant general, a full general, to become a deputy, if you want, to become a deputy auditor general, so that he walks into these places and makes sure that some auditing takes place, so that the taxpayers' money does not just go unaccounted. You can vet the auditors. You can train even those intelligence officers to audit and at least go with the stamp of the Auditor General. So there's a lot that can be done. So what am I saying? To what extent does Parliament ensure that public participation and input in the budget process? How extensively do parliamentary committees consult the public on issues of budget? This is another area we have to look into. There is a fair attempt to invite the public to contribute to the critiquing the budget, mainly through civil society organizations. So we've been tracking when civil society organizations, citizens appear before these budget committees. We look at the recommendations they make. So the committees, after they have invited the people, so we look at what's the uptake of the recommendations citizens make. So which of these recommendations are being taken by these committees and brought in their report to the plenary? It had increased, meaning that citizens were actually involved in the decision-making of Parliament. That's a good thing to encourage. But of late, we're beginning to see a decline. That's a trend which I think the new Parliament needs to build on. Okay. Otherwise, the 10th Parliament did something in that area.
If you can just pause there.
I pause there.
Yes, just pause there. Let's hear what the panelists say about that report. I'll start with the member of the Budget Committee. You make recommendations, and then Atoti this way, Atoti that way, them around, and then you end up breaching the same things. Let's speak to that, Honorable Chimumbi. At least you're the only member of the Budget Committee here.
And the former member, I don't know whether Opendi associate or something. He has just left the Budget Committee.
Yeah.
Honorable Prukol mentions two committees, the Budget Committee
Because I was told appropriation role.
and the Committee of National Economy. And we may look at the impact. Right now, it is very evident. We have borrowed now as a percentage of our GDP. Right now we have exceeded what we stated in the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility. By end of this year, we would have borrowed 51.4%. The law says we shouldn't have borrowed beyond 50%. The full implication of it is that credible institutions like IMF, World Bank, will no longer find Uganda bankable and trustable for them to lend, to give us money on concessional loans. Therefore, increasingly we are going to borrow on non-concessional loans. And even the non-concessional loans are going to find it difficult. We are now extending to borrow internally through domestic borrowing. Now, through domestic borrowing, we are causing another problem as we are speaking now. We have accumulated 15 trillion of the domestic debt. We can't pay. The rollover this year, financial year, we should have paid 8 trillion. We did not have a single penny. So we went back to the market through what they call debt refinancing and borrowed another 8 trillion.
You authorized 3 billion, and then they went ahead and borrowed 6.8 trillion. Sorry.
Now, the full impact of it, is that our interest payment
from the domestic
of the current financial year is going to be 6.7 trillion. Now, we are going to borrow the net borrowing domestically without debt refinancing is going to be 2.4. But interest this financial year is going to be 6 trillion. Therefore, we are going to be paying more interest now than the money we will actually borrow. That is an absurdity in real terms.
How does this pass through your committee? How does this pass through the committee you sit on?
Most of what he has talked about, we have now a government that, when you look at the law, the constitution, they empowered the Minister of Finance to use all means below the sun to raise money for government needs, to borrow and to do everything. Now, they questioned and said, and this is where the danger is, and let me articulate this.
You agree when it comes to action?
No, let me exonerate Parliament. They agreed that loans per se should be borrowed by the approval of Parliament. Now, for monetary management, they allowed government to borrow through treasury bonds and bills that don't necessarily need the approval of Parliament. So most of the money now currently being borrowed is without the approval of Parliament. Because they are through...
Is that true?
Is that a loophole in the law?
That's a loophole in the law.
No. I agree on the loophole issue, but I'm saying, is it true that most of the money borrowed is without the approval of Parliament?
Because most of the...
Because the figures speak
because most
differently.
of the money being borrowed, that's why you have a small thing. Now,
every day, Honorable Bahati is on the floor.
Every day, Honorable Bahati
and you're
raises
voting
a loan
aye.
equivalent to what?
Yes.
That's why amortization out of the 6 trillion, amortization is 1.9 trillion. That is amortization money we used to pay for foreign loans borrowed. The rest of the money is for domestic borrowing. Now, this domestic borrowing is hemorrhage. It does not in any way come through approval of Parliament. Okay. That's a lacuna in the law. Now, it was supposed to be an exception to the rule. That government idea, the framers of the law, government cannot get stuck. They said, in the extreme, that the cash flow has challenges. Please do this to balance, but pay within a financial year. Now, government used that loophole to make it a normal way of transacting and conducting business and under abuse. So that's why today you have all this huge debt. I've asked the Minister of Finance, he's been there, not once, said, how are we going to settle this trillion? Even if you brought Kasaija,
Before you settle, can you tell citizens the impact of that? Of domestic borrowing at that level?
And I can tell you.
And how the banks who should be lending money to small, medium enterprises, for example, private sector, for development purpose, now take their money because it's risky to give pull call, risky to give subsidy, risky to give. So you take now your money to buy those treasury bills, bonds, and you go and play golf. Because lending to government is not risky. The interest rate is high, you make your money, you don't run around chasing anybody to pay your debt. So you find that the accessibility of citizens to credit is, I'm telling you that now when government comes also to borrow from where citizens borrow from.
But
Okay,
Purkol,
so let's listen to
Purkol,
all.
So
and
what
then
does
we'll
it
come
mean?
to-
Purkol,
Yeah.
that doesn't fly.
Let's listen to all.
When
yes.
government makes it the main
This
way
argument-
around.
This argument doesn't fly. If you say when you borrow, when you lend to government, you can go and play golf
They do.
because the interest rate is high, it is stable, you don't have to bother, it is not risky. On the other hand, Mwanga Kihumbi is claiming that government is not paying domestic debt. So
Because it has overdone it.
No, the two,
When you
listen,
overdo it,
listen, the
it
two-
catches up with you.
the
So
two
then
don't
what
fly.
is the fact?
The
fact
two
is
don't
this.
fly. The two don't fly.
The fact is this, because you've made it your main place for borrowing, and you're borrowing at high interest rate,
First of
a
all-
very short repayment period, unlike the constitutional loans, which are 0.5%,
With a grace
0.3%, a grace period of 30 years, 25 years. Now, when you go to commercial bank like Stanbic, like Standard Chartered Bank, and borrow money, these are commercial banks at a high rate, very short. When you go to China, at very short period to repayment at high rates. So you actually put a country on a trajectory which is dangerous.
Okay, let's listen to all. Yes.
No,
You
oh,
see-
is wrong.
you
He's
see-
not understanding.
You see, I know because you sit in the budget committee, you like picking words like amortization and then you come and throw around. You think you'll bamboozle your listeners. But first of all, let us go to the basics.
Go to the basics.
Why do we borrow? We borrow because there's pressure on the government to deliver services.
To buy cars for MPs, for
Sometimes
example.
it is legitimate, quite often it is illegitimate, like the case you are raising. Obviously, if members of parliament demand 300 million for vehicles, and the government is only able to provide 200 million,
Go for high
the government,
purchase.
the government, no, members of parliament don't want to go for higher purchase. You remember,
Buy for them and they return when they leave.
remember about 8 months ago, the government of Uganda said, for the Kampala-Jinja Expressway, we want to go for PPP, public-private partnership. What did the Speaker of Parliament say? What did members of Parliament eventually say? They said, why is it that for the road going to eastern Uganda, to Busoga, you want PPP?
To go to
For-
Busia, to
for-
Malaba, please.
But that was a legitimate question.
This is
That was a legitimate question because if all the roads in a particular section
listen,
are
and then,
funded
listen, and
by...
then she put a rider. She said,
Yes.
for the roads going elsewhere, you go to borrow. So the executive found itself in a catch-22 situation. So we are looking for borrowing for the Jinja Expressway, similar to the MP's cards, similar. Similar.
The road is not going to Busoga.
I'm quoting what the speaker. I'm quoting what the speaker said.
Correct.
I'm quoting what the speaker said. I'm quoting what the speaker said.
But
On record.
also
Listen.
why are the other roads
No,
given proper
no,
funding?
that's,
and then the one
that's,
to the east
that's
is,
a good debate. No, that's
is
a good
levied.
The money you raise from
But
Malaba.
I am quoting what
That's
the speaker
trade route.
said on the floor of the House, that the road going to Busoga, when it is going to Busoga, you want to borrow. You want PPP.
Yeah.
But the one going elsewhere, you can't go and borrow, and it is not fair. And that argument is correct to that extent, or is valid to that extent. Now, when government gets pressures of all sorts, whether legitimate or not, the government will look for where to get the money. Borrowing is often, whether domestic or external, is often the recourse. Last week, we were here with Honorable Bahati, and to the base of my recollection, he said 60% of the borrowing is actually from outside Uganda. So it is not, Mwanga Kivumbi's statement is not borne by truth or fact, because the Minister of Finance was here on record on the same show And that's what he said. Thirdly,
The trend.
what do we borrow for? Yes, there are elements of consumption, but much of the borrowing, again, as Honorable Bahati and Honorable Kasaija have said severally, is that we take this money for development purposes. Yes, there is a problem of lack of adequate preparedness to absorb the projects, to absorb the money, to execute and complete in time, so
That's
that
what the Auditor General says. Yeah,
so that the money produces the benefits.
Okay.
Let me respond to the issue here raised about classified expenditure. Mr. Purkol says when he was Director General of ACE, and I don't fault him, he was there twice, classified expenditure was small. What was the threat then? What was the threat now? Perhaps that's what is informing the increase in classified expenditure. Then he puts another claim.
It can be
he says
audited.
it is not audited.
It can be audited.
Parliament passed a law to set up a committee within Parliament to audit classified expenditure. I think there are 3 members or something like that, together with the Auditor General, who is an officer of Parliament. Now, if that process is not adequate, is not effective, is not foolproof, I think the fault then is with Parliament, because the Auditor General is its officer. And therefore, Parliament cannot make a claim that we have a classified expenditure, which is requisitioned before we give to the executive and is not properly audited. We don't know what it does. The third area, which Sabiti you seem to have run away from, what are the low moments of this Parliament?
We'll end with that.
Because for me, I think what Honorable Ogwang vigorously tried to challenge, the perception created by the conduct of members of Parliament that you can have a free ride. As soon as you are sworn in, the first thing you do, you want to load it on the public by all sorts of vexatious demands. You ask for cars, you put much of your emoluments outside the taxman's reach. Secondly, these rumors which are not ending, that, for example, when accounting officers come during the budget cycle, what he's talking about, and Monga Kivumbi hasn't touched on it, that the reason they turn about on their recommendation is that there is negotiation. If I'm an accounting officer, I might not have put something in my plan, but I can negotiate with a committee leader, I can go to the budget committee, I can go to the economy committee, and I negotiate to be added money, which
that I'm violating the law,
yeah,
but
violating,
please
but because
pass my budget.
when it reaches me or my institution, I will find some way to send that money to the people who permitted it to be added to my budget. The second leg to that argument.
That coming from a government spokesman
Yes,
is an indictment.
I mean, these are
the whole
rumors.
country.
No, these are rumors that are not ending, and it's not being helped, in my view, by the conduct of members of Parliament, both from government and from opposition side.
Thank you.
You remember the 7th Parliament, 8th Parliament, when the Honorable Elias Lukwago accused a member of FDC, who then chaired the Committee on Local Government Accounts Committee, in respect to Nakasero Market. You remember that case? Do you remember that case? That there is backhand slapping of members of Parliament, especially the ones who are on the accountability committee, who, by the way, happen to be opposition lead. They are slapped on the backhand and so on. And then the thing you're talking about, this rumor, which the NRM has not successfully, in my view, explained or even denied, that NRM members have to be seen beyond official compensation to conduct business. And that's what led us.
We're back to transactions.
No, yes, this is what led us to what Honorable Gwang said. How come at Amendment of 102B became so controversial that it necessitated Parliament now officially to vote money, 29 million, for each member of Parliament to go and consult their constituencies as if their usual emolument was not adequate for that consultation. Finally, you remember when we were handling COVID, the 10 billion, the 20 million to each member of parliament, which was decided by the speaker. You remember the speaker saying, you're my members of parliament, don't answer. I am the one going to answer for you. It took this show and the media generally to hold the speaker, to hold members of parliament by the collar, and eventually the president,
The executive does not
to
bring it.
force members of parliament to go and surrender the 20 million.
Then he
back
added
to-
them, he gave them 40.
I don't have that evidence.
He
that
gave
added
them 40 after
40
that.
million. I don't have that evidence in writing.
Well, he got back 20,
No,
gave them 40.
What I know is that parliament gave members of parliament 20 million.
What I
for
know is that
COVID.
the president withdrew the 20
that
and
one,
gave
that,
them 40.
that one is documented. No, that one is that one is documented because members of parliament, all of them received it, and they took to the district.
Okay.
And remember, some of them, the way they took the money to the district, when eventually they conceded, they went there still. Some of them sent houseboys, sent
And produce an
drivers.
indictment on the leadership of Parliament.
Thank you all. Let's
it
listen
was
to-
received, but you can't. You
on
can't.
self-interest.
Yes.
Let's listen
So-
to the former budget committee member, Honorable Ogwang. Yes.
First of all, I have a lot of issues which I need to raise, but I'm specifically interested in the issues raised by my colleague here, Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi, on the question of Uganda's debt sustainability. First, what are the priority areas which we borrow this money for? Because we must understand that. And I want to break
on paper and in practice.
Yes, and I want to break it down. We borrow this money for specifically in areas number 1, energy and mineral development. And I'm happy the minister is here. Part of the borrowed money, 26% of what is borrowed goes to the energy and mineral development. Number 2, works and transport. 18% of this borrowed money goes specifically to address issues of works and transport. Number 3, water and environment. 9% goes to water and environment. Number 4, we look at public sector, 4%. Number 5, we look at areas of accountability, takes 29%. So, and then we have others. So, when we're talking about borrowing, like Honorable Chivumbi here is trying to make it clear that the country has over-borrowed. But we must also be cognizant of the fact that why are we borrowing? What impact is this money bringing to the economy? For instance, talk about the energy sector. Which are the projects which we're undertaking in the energy sector? Let's talk about, number 1, transmission lines. Number 2, Karuma hydroelectric power. Number 3 is Simba. Number 4, there are quite many projects which are undertaken in the energy sector, which entirely...
Honorable Ogwang, sorry to interrupt, but you see, when you talk about the sector, and the president comes and talks about Umeme and how a bad deal was negotiated behind his back, then you create generation, transmission, collection, massage, all sorts of agencies.
You know,
It doesn't make a lot
for
of
me,
sense.
I am trying first to classify the reason why this money is borrowed. This money is, let's talk about oil and gas. This money, like for instance, talk about in the road sector. How many roads are being constructed in the Bunyoro sub-region? How many roads we're talking about issues of saying that ours in the east is this? What is the purpose of the money? So when we're talking about borrowing, let's be realistic to ourselves. Is this money helping the country to develop?
Is it?
Now, it is. And that's why I'm telling you, Karuma, how many megawatts is it and Isimba? How many megawatts are they adding to the country?
What's the impact on the cost of
Something
power?
we've been talking 15 years ago.
I'm coming to address myself to that.
Yes.
We are adding 883 megawatts to the national grid.
Which is more expensive.
I'm coming to address it. Number 2, what is it going to address? It is going to address, first of all, to lower the cost of electricity. Because now we are saying electricity is expensive. When it's lowered, how many jobs will it create to the economy? How many industries will it attract? So when we're talking about borrowing, let's be realistic. We are not borrowing for our personal consumption. Now, when Honorable Chivumi talks about internal borrowing, we must appreciate at the moment we have had COVID. And it's not only Uganda. Uganda is not exceptional. Let's be realistic here. So sometimes, when my colleagues address some of these things, we tend to believe as if we are not in our own country.
Honorable Ogwang.
But for me, for instance, my brother there.
Honorable Ogwang, we have been cadres. We are all cadres.
My uncle, can I address myself? I was coming to that.
At
He
our
has
time,
electricity
the
up.
siasa was-
Can I be
Honorable
protected?
Pulkol, maybe just for the record, I haven't been a cadre. So when you say all of us,
I'm saying,
let me first get
Honorable
my,
Pulkol,
let me first get my
if
neck
you go
off.
to the 10-point
Yes,
program,
yes.
Honorable Pulkol, can I be protected?
Yes,
When you are
please.
submitting,
Let's listen to the minister.
you are
yes.
quiet.
Yes.
There's a transmission line from Opuyo to Moroto.
up to Kotido.
Do you know the purpose of that transmission line? You know, sometimes I tend to fail to understand. You know that Moroto is going to have a cement factory? Specifically, that transmission line, that is money borrowed. We don't have that money. But the last one which I want to say, Uganda is able to sustain its debt sustainability. I also want to give a comparison within the EAC region. When we talk about Uganda's overborrowed, let's talk about the first country in the EAC is Tanzania with 38%. The second country is Uganda. By the way, in terms of borrowed, so when we talk about Uganda, the third is Rwanda. The fourth is Kenya. So when we talk about we have overborrowed, let's be realistic. We are borrowing this. We are borrowing this money. So the other issue which I wanted to bring here is, I agree with the figures he has given. At the moment, we're at 42.2%. That is correct. And in the next financial year, we shall be at 51. But I want to again put it on record that the government is able to sustain, to pay. 47. I want
What?
That is the level at which we have borrowed.
All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Just hold it. Let's listen to the minister for whom they have borrowed a lot of money. That's what Honorable said, yes.
No, of course, I think let me just indicate that His Excellency the President gave clear directives to the Ministry of Finance during this term, this 5-year term, that there will not be any borrowing for cham-cham, if I can use his words.
Even at commercial rate.
Borrowing should be strictly for infrastructure development. And this has been the focus, that all monies borrowed have been for infrastructure. The oil roads have been worked on, the airport within Kabale is on. We have extended the road network. Actually, now you can drive through all the major towns of this country on tarmac. Almost all, no, almost all.
Okay.
What is
Almost okay,
all,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
We are
Yeah. For us, we drive through lakes and rivers.
yeah, but most of the major
Before you get to West Nile.
most of the major roads in this country are now tarmacked. So certainly the borrowing has been there. The borrowing still continues and it will continue. However, for me, my point is not really on the borrowing. I think my biggest problem is on the value for money. That should be the focus. And that should be where the oversight committees should actually pay attention to. Because in borrowing, we hope to extend infrastructure, construct roads, extend electricity, but I think it should be done not at exorbitant prices. That should be our focus.
How are we doing in that regard?
No, this is what I
From your
said.
assessment, yes.
I moved to my brothers here in the opposition because they are supposed to
The
check us.
oversight committee.
The oversight committees are supposed to
But
do
they
this work.
oversight,
a backlog.
they oversee what you
2
do.
years
So
ago,
so
3
from an
years
insider's perspective, yes.
Postmortem.
Of course, we have a problem. We have a problem with the anti-corruption agencies, which have also their challenges and are not doing their work. These are institutions that were put there by government, by the executive, the Inspector General of Government, to be able to help us look at the other side.
That one is lame duck. You don't have an IDG, you
no,
don't have
but
a
they are
deputy.
there. That is their work.
It's yawning.
So if corruption is thriving and increasing in this country, are you going to blame us when we have institutions that we have put in place to help us fight
What
corruption?
makes it difficult for
Let's just
Parliament
listen to the minister.
handle?
David, I think let's proceed this way. Let's listen, and then you can respond to the issues.
Yes, so the borrowing is there, and as I said, and it will continue. Because definitely you cannot have all the money that you need to do all the infrastructure that you plan to do. The NRM government now is moving to another phase where we are going to start our 5-year journey. We have pledges that we have made to this country. There are roads that roads and even extension of other infrastructure that we have made. For instance, if you look at the road from Nakasongola through Pakwach to Lira, that road should be tarmacked, and I think it's already in the pipeline. The road from Nakapiripirit
Mbale to
from Muyembe through to Nakapiripirit should be tarmacked. The work is ongoing. The road from all the way from Kapchorwa to Bukwo is almost near completion. So generally, the borrowing has been to improve on infrastructure, which government has achieved a significant percentage there. For me, the score has been quite good. I've traversed this country, moved to almost all parts of the country, save for just a few where we have. But the key issue here is corruption. The key issue here is the quality of those works. That should be our focus. And I hope that...
And those who negotiate these loans.
Yes, and I hope that as we get into the next term, we'll really tackle this cancer called corruption.
Thank you.
Because
Thank you
it's
very much.
not only for the accounting officers, it's actually everywhere, including in these committees, the oversight committees of
They also
Parliament.
do transactions.
They are also transaction.
But, Chair, let me speak about the committees of Parliament. First of all, the Accountability Committee are majority dominated by NRM.
You only offer leadership.
You only offer leadership.
You're supposed to offer leadership, effective leadership.
Please. You see, when I was speaking, it got me off the floor. And then I stopped. I'm very disciplined. I'm very disciplined. Then he jumped, he tried to take over you and define the issues. Now brought on issues. Now, let me have a small bit of time. One, Oversight Committee. They are dominated by Cabinet, by NRM, by NRM, by extension, but they are post-mortem committees.
2 years, 3 years back.
Okay? We got a post-mortem report. The task of implementing and utilizing public money squarely lies with the government. The government has agencies outside even the accountability committees. They have the IGG.
That one is lame duck.
No, ideally, why should you make it lame duck? It's because of every transaction in this country is not through a normal procedure. It is through a meeting at State House. Every huge procurement in this country is not through the Directorate of Public Procurement. You have to find your way to Entebbe and have a sitting with the president. All these Karuma, all those big roads are not implemented, figures agreed through a normal procurement. It is through meetings in State House. It's a clearing center for transactions. Now, we have a whole cabinet we facilitate expensively. By the beyond Parliament, you like to quote about cars of Parliament. In the budget report, the Minister of Ethics and Integrity, we are going to buy him a car of 700 million.
You have approved that.
It's approved. It is. We are going
We
to buy
drove
him.
Laurel's
Yes.
Nissan Laurel.
You talk about
one
200?
time.
Him, the director, he drives a car. If he drives a brand new car, he say MPs.
We drove Santanas.
He drives a car of nearly over 500 million, brand new. But he talks about an MP 200. First, say sorry.
We were very modest. I don't know what this is.
First, so sorry. He drives a car.
Do you want to add on record that car is not his personal car, but
Yeah.
belongs to his office?
It
Yours
belongs to-
is
you
a
see,
personal
you see,
car. The
even
200 is yours. You're
let
taking
me-
it to
let me even
Gotamba.
say this.
Yes.
Ideally, government should have, let me defend Parliament for once, and it should have been done so as the commissioner. An MP should have been given a car with a driver and with, like all other government officials. It found it was expensive to do that. When he knows the figure was out of normal if you had to do that and then repair 500 vehicles. They decided, let's give this servant a one-off, okay? And he goes and buys a second-hand car, and which is 200. It is more economical than if each MP was given money like an Ufono Pondo.
Why are you giving money to buy a car?
No, not given if they had bought for.
If they had bought, actually, if they had bought 4.
Honorable Chimumi,
the
the difference is that
No, if they had bought 4, not
the
not the
difference
one.
is that the Minister for Minerals here will get a car, the 200 million as MP for Tororo.
That one they have
Then
an
we'll get
ethical
another
issue.
Mpenkoni as
They have an
minister.
ethical issue.
Yeah.
Why should the minister also go for 200?
Well, she could be fired anytime.
And those are members of the executive
Yeah, but
committee.
first and foremost, the MPs.
Honorable
But they will say
I
the
drive,
MPs.
I drive my
can be
personal
dropped
car
anytime.
when I'm doing my personal
Okay, how
business.
often you do it is
Their
another
cabinet
day.
job is
It's
not
the other
guaranteed
value
for
for
5
money
years.
thing you have been raising
Okay,
here. It's
we-
value for
let
money.
me-
No, secondly.
Honorable
so
Chimumi,
let me
we have
defend-
we have about 13 minutes
Yes.
to transact business
let
here.
me defend, so I'm defending that. Then
yeah,
the other
we need
issue,
to get
the
something
other
again.
issue, is not, Ogwang is not getting properly. Ogwang, let me tell you this, and you know these figures. The recurrent budget of government is 28 trillion. Recurrent. Our collection, if we collect 100%, is 20 trillion. Therefore, for consumptive purposes, we go and borrow 80 trillion to keep car running, to keep our vehicles and everything.
RDC is paid, everybody
Okay?
is-
So all the borrowed money is not what you say is for development. Right now, today, in the 11th hour of Parliament, tomorrow, they are laying a supplementary schedule. In the 11th, that's the last day of Parliament. They are laying a supplementary schedule for money going to be paid to pay wages. The most borrowing that has happened in the domestic market has been to finance classified expenditure, which is now 7.9 trillion. Now, if you add interest of 6.9, you have 15. So out of 20, on day one, security and interest knock off 15. So you have only remained with 5. Now, if you are to pay statutory wages, which is 4 trillion, you remain with 1 trillion out of URA money collected for doing other things. Now, all the money we borrow, majority today, does not go for roads. It's for consumption. No. The economy is so badly run, and you don't know.
I don't agree with you.
That's why I
The
said
reason
you
why
are
I don't
not
agree-
right.
I
in
can
what-
give the source of the figures.
No,
You know
now-
the good thing, Honorable Chivumbi,
I
here.
know they gave you a message
no,
there. and
they
you
didn't give me a message. First of all, I want to correct
yes.
you here.
So,
and it's important we listen.
Yeah,
The
I
source
listened
of-
to you,
the
sir.
source of
So I'm wondering who is listening
The
to
source
whom
of
now.
my
But I
data
listened to
is
you.
Minister of Finance.
You see,
And I also
listened.
want you to quote your source.
It's Minister of Finance.
No, I don't
The
agree
figures,
with you.
actually, the figures I can tell you, they are within the budget
All right.
reports that we are reading. So, Mr. Ogwang,
No,
let's
I
be
don't
real.
agree with you.
The pre-call has been saying, let me tell you this. I mean, the pool call, a pool call has been saying, look at the cost of running the office of the President of the Republic of Uganda. 400 billion.
I can also answer that.
Okay, 400 billion. Look at the cost of running Parliament.
How much?
620 billion. Look at the cost. We have been looking at these costs. Look at the cost of which money government is going to spend on rent of offices. 240 billion.
To who is it going?
Let me tell
Isn't
you,
it going
look
back
at
to the
the
economy?
cost of money. I will give you figures that you are going to spend on fuel. If you have not worked on this figure.
Parliament spending on rent.
On Parliament,
Exactly.
they have an issue. They want to hire a building
they have
of
hired.
Sudil. You know that new building, Kingdom, for 13 billion per year. That is extremely unacceptable.
And you have approved it.
No, I'm saying that is extremely unacceptable.
No, you have approved that
No, what
figure.
I'm saying, it is a commission where it sits.
No, the approval is yours.
No,
In
no,
the
no.
plenary.
What I'm saying,
Very well.
no. What I
But the
want.
MPs must be accommodated.
Yes, they must
Maybe
be
for now,
accommodated.
but we hope that.
No, they must be, but at what cost? Let me tell you, Mr. Opendi, if you have 13 trillion, Madam Honorable, if you have 13 trillion and you want to acquire a property on Kampala Road, and over 5 years you pay an owner 13 trillion, he will give you a building. You will buy one. But why do you rent? with that kind of money.
You as
So-
budget committee, you have allowed
So,
Parliament
so,
to rent
so
to rent a tent,
don't
to
say
rent a
budget
tent.
committee. This
All right, so-
hemorrhage is all over across all agencies. So, Gwang,
All right, so let's proceed this way.
things you are saying are not right.
No, first of
All right,
all,
Honorable Wang.
Understand they're renting a tent at 14 million each day.
Okay, let me first get back my show. Let me get back my show, gentlemen and ladies.
All this is hemorrhage.
Under COVID, 14 million every day.
14 million.
Okay, Honorable Wang, let's
28
proceed this way.
million.
28 million.
There are two tents.
David and Oo, I can easily put a curtain and you go and have a conversation that side. We have 10 minutes to get out of here. Okay. And I want us to do a quick thing. One, your highs and lows of the 10th Parliament and a word to the 11th Parliament. I'll start with you, David. You have 2 minutes to do that.
Wow. Hey. I think this time has come for the country to look at it this way. That the moment they elect you Speaker and Deputy Speaker, I think for goodness sake, allow them to resign their seat as MPs so that they become neutral to moderate the rest of the House.
You didn't remember to put that in the law.
No. And then also allow, so long as you guarantee their job, like judges, for example, so you don't change them mid-term. Even if it means guaranteeing for 10 years. After all, you've been a deputy speaker for 10 years, you become a speaker for 10 years, even if you want 10 years guaranteed. But at least so that the people of your constituents can come and elect somebody else who will speak for them. Because I saw when Honorable Jacob Olanya came, because he's not chairing the House, to sit in the and then wanting to be picked to speak. It was so embarrassing. Because you ask yourself, who's speaking for the people of his constituency or for the people of Kamuli? So this is an issue now that the country needs to look at seriously. But guarantee their job and allow them to move so that they don't even go to attend caucuses, so that they are there for the entire country, even if they're NRM, even if they are who. But at least that's what happens in other countries. Second, is it possible to delink the salary of the MPs, the emoluments of MPs, from their sitting allowance or plenary and committees? Because attendance is very, very low, very poor. 16% attendance rate, 42% committee attendance. So it is very poor. So how do we make sure that MPs actually men attend committee work more, women attend plenary plenary sessions more? So attendance is an issue. How do we enforce this? During our time, from 87 onwards, 86 onwards, we were having sitting allowance different from our salaries. And you cannot be paid unless you attend, and so forth. So that's something to look to and enforce, because the Speaker has lost it. In terms of attendance, of committees, of plenary, forget it. If they don't change that to enforce the rules, then it's a lost cause. Because now you have to adjourn to wait for the ruling party caucus should be sensitive to allow some members of parliament, if a matter is so serious about your people, at least after all you have numbers, you could allow these MPs to differ from the party position on the floor to allow them to speak. Because what do you lose when they lose the constituency? It is the best interest of the party. The 11th Parliament should include in the rules of procedure requiring a minister to come back to the House at least within 60 days when Parliament has taken a decision. At the moment when you look at the rules of procedure, there's no requirement for a minister to come back to the House. We are recommending that, please, once the Parliament has taken a decision, require the minister to come back within 60 days to report on the course of action. Because most of the decisions taken, members are not satisfied with the answers being given by ministers, by prime minister. They are too broad, too general. They don't even tell you the time frame. Finally, the 11th Parliament should enforce its rules of procedure. For example, you find that the rules, the bills balancing between legislation, oversight, representation, appropriation. When you look at the laws that take within 45 days, which is the requirement, the rules of procedure, are mainly those that deal with revenue, taxes, and so forth, the economy. Those ones are handled very fast. But others are not, like, for example, domestic relations bill. It has been there for 1,153 days and is still counting.
Thank you very much. Check it up from there.
Mr. Pulkol left the NRM and went to FDC, then went gallivanting. I don't think it's appropriate for the NRM to take advice how to run NRM from somebody who
You
doesn't.
found him worthy to be DGS.
It's
You may want to listen to
somebody
him.
who doesn't
Twice,
like
my dear.
NRM. No, I am saying he went away from NRM, went to FDC, and is still gallivanting somewhere in the wilderness.
I'm actually more qualified.
So I don't think it's
I know what
appropriate.
happens everywhere.
I don't think it's appropriate for the NRM to take advice on how to run NRM from Mr. Pulkol.
It's best practice elsewhere.
Now, it is a no-brainer. We have seen that even the judges who don't hold political party offices or cards have been accused of bias in their judgment, in their rulings. We have seen civil servants being accused. So the fact that a speaker comes from NRM and only when they are picked, then you say, let them relinquish party card and party position. I don't think it is a brainer that they will be impartial, they will be neutral, and they will do the correct things. I think what we need to do, once we have rules, the rules must be applied uniformly.
All right.
And stick to them. My low moment is what Honorable Payne said and what I said earlier on. We cannot continue to have ministers who have 72 or more. And then you have parliament. They are not frequent. They are not regular. And even when they stand up, they appear clumsy. I think for me, that's a low moment. That you have front bench who should be the head of the spear being blunt. Secondly, committee chairpersons, and generally the members of the NRM. When the purpose we caucus is to deepen our understanding of the issues, is to sharpen our discourse on the issues, and thirdly, to build convergence. If we have done those three things effectively, there would be no reason why a member of parliament would be worried that the issues of Moroto, the issues of Kabong, the issue of Mulanda hasn't been attended to by the NRM caucus. The NRM caucus, the NRM interest shouldn't be in contradiction, especially irreconcilable contradiction with the interests of the rest of the country.
All right.
And then finally, the issue of members of parliament thinking that once they have been elected, they have been sworn in, they are members of parliament, they are alpha and omega, that they have no humility, even to try and appreciate that there are things that they don't know, so that they humble themselves to learn from those that know. That's a low moment for me.
All right, let's listen to OO's MP.
My MP is good. He's a good MP.
It's a moment to speak.
Thank you.
From you.
Thank you very much. I just want for me, this 10th Parliament has done good work, despite the challenges. Quite a number of bills, motions have been passed in the House, and some of them even as recent as this week. The sexual offences bill is a key plus for us. We've had no law against human sacrifice, which is on the increase. We need to thank the private member, Honorable Batiku, who brought that. Of course, government supported the bill. So a number of bills, resolutions, motions were made and passed. So I think that, to me, is a plus. I keep hearing OO mentioning, I don't want to end without saying this. I keep hearing him mentioning this. Every time I watch this Frontline, he says, how can you have a speaker who does not allow a deputy speaker to chair a session? I have been a deputy speaker, and you know it, before. It is the speaker who chairs the House. And it's up to the speaker, if he or she feels he's not available to chair, to give you an opportunity to chair. So let's not sit here and make
the
it.
money to hire somebody to read newspapers.
No, but there are other things. There are other things I have done. No.
Deputy is in futility?
No, there are other
I've
duties.
been a deputy minister.
Please,
Ministers
hold
used to
on.
do that. That's why we abolished deputy minister and we made them ministers of state
You
so that
can-
they are alternate
Can I?
ministers.
Yes,
We
but
went
the
through that.
speaker,
We suffered.
if the speaker is not available to chair,
So the deputy speaker should go read newspapers, eat
no,
mandazi,
please, there are
and then-
duties, there are other duties that the deputy can do. Your work is not, it's not only the house.
Thank you very much.
Allow me to
Please,
just mention
please,
this point.
yeah, speak to your
So
voter,
it
yeah.
should not be an issue here on Frontline that you mention that every time.
No.
As if you were sent by somebody to come and talk. They do share. This is why.
Leadership in
Please, when you were
Parliament comes,
speaking, excuse me, when
we
you were
shall raise
speaking,
it.
I listened attentively.
You are his MP.
I listened attentively, my voter. Please, can you listen? So all that I wanted to say is that there is no way, I've been looking at your assessment. The Deputy Speaker, during his time, passed 51 bills. The Speaker passed 50 bills, and people have been saying, so if the Speaker did not have permission to do so, or was not given an opportunity to chair, how would he have passed these bills? So let us not make that.
No, but also, it is on record that for 365 days, the deputy speaker only came to the house when the speaker lost a niece.
Please,
That's in public record.
if the Speaker is available to chair the House, what is the problem? If the President is available to chair cabinet every day, should we make it an issue that the Vice President has not been given an opportunity to chair cabinet? So for me, I think there are things we keep mentioning here that are not good. But of course, we shall listen to what our voters also tell us on this matter. And my people have already spoken. But the laws, the law bit of it, of this 10th Parliament, to me, the issue of absenteeism has to be addressed. If we are to talk about corruption, this is one form of corruption because you are paid as a member of Parliament to be present, to do your legislative work, to do your oversight work, to represent your people, and of course also appropriate. The appropriation comes once in maybe once, yes, in the year, but the other three functions must be continuous. But you find members of Parliament absent. Some you don't even see them for 3 months. There are even those that I've just been seeing recently. Who is this? That this is a member of Parliament. Yesterday I almost rose up to ask who that we have a stranger in the tent. So absenteeism to me has been an issue of the 10th Parliament, and I hope the members of the 11th Parliament can see this as an issue and be present and do their work. Otherwise, the turnover in 2026 will be even worse than what it is now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll share the remaining minutes between Honorable Muhammad Mwanga Chivumbi
For me,
and Honorable Peter
there
Ogwanda.
are two small issues. Going forward, the country must examine whether you need a parliament that is full-time, 60 months, over a period of 5 years. That you have 500 people whom you have moved from any other duty, and they are there for you to feed and look after. Many countries have moved away from that. Many countries have moved away from this much. If a country is stable and your legislative infrastructure is in place, then it's properly for appropriation. You can afford to be periodical. And you let this honorable
You know
colleagues.
that's the future impossible tense that this
I'm
parliament
saying
to sit
if you
in
get a sensible leadership,
can approve
it is
that
a proposition.
recommendation.
It is a proposition to look at whether you need a full-time parliament going forward. That's 24 hours. I mean, they are guests of state, these honorable colleagues. I don't think I'll run a state that way. That I have 500 people who are guests of a state for 60 days sitting there. I don't think going forward Uganda needs that kind of arrangement. It is for future examination.
Okay.
Secondly, may the President of the Republic of Uganda, called Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, let Parliament be Parliament. Okay? There is an overbearing influence from the executive on institution of Parliament through the caucus.
Is it that we have political invertebrates in that house? That they
Like a
can't...
backbone.
They are steering wheels, they just keep being moved,
Of course, you have to know. You see, the buck stops with the president. in the governance of a country. He sets the best model, the best example on how to govern. The way you delegate, the way you let people be who they are. But more increasingly, I think the president is failing to fully fit and liberate himself from a guerrilla military leader to a civilian leader who presides over institutions that function.
Okay.
That's why you see the fact, too, Honorable Pendi, Parliament deserves a greater harmony at the top leadership. Let us not defend an absurdity. That's true. Okay? That's not defend an absurdity. The Parliament does not deserve two speakers at loggerheads, even if it is perceptual. But in real practice, it is something going forward. No, going forward. Let's say things for who they are. I know some of you fear to say these things. This is not the best practice. It's not a parliament I would wish to be in, or to say the country, we have young children, that's the best way to run an institution. No, not in any way. It's not in any class of good management or on a page in any book. So for a minister to come here and defend that.
Who is defending what?
You are defending that absurdity.
But Honorable...
It's really my low moment.
My voter... No, my voter mentioned something.
On the front
I only said... No,
the low moment was...
No, let us
Frontline.
get it here. I only said that I keep hearing this. Every Frontline, my brother mentioned this.
Indefensible.
And he mentioned it even here.
Parliament deserves a harmonized...
Absolutely, and we all agree.
Harmonized.
All right.
We
top
all agree
leadership.
that is what it should be.
And those who are going to be speakers of Parliament need to create an environment where there is a cordial working
That is what it should be. We all agree on that.
That is an aspiration.
The committee of assistant speakers.
And
Absolutely,
finally,
we all agree on that. Honorable
My moment,
Yes.
my low moment.
we need to listen to Honorable Gwang and get going.
My low moment is about all the things you are saying, absenteeism, blah, blah, is because of corruption and transactional politics that is at the backbone.
Inside Parliament.
Inside Parliament.
Generally, because the chief transactor, he knows. The chief transactor, he knows. He has been a conduit. And this one, I know this is my friend, has been a conduit, and he knows the things he does. And it's very...
To the citizens, we cannot take that. You have power to impeach a president, you have power to censor a minister, you have power to recommend interdiction. Why is Parliament not using all its power?
People,
you just keep blaming the president.
All right, thank you. Don't be theoretical. When we try to stand on our own...
This is the Constitution.
They sent SFC to beat us, and what did you do? You stayed in your house.
Finally,
you stayed in your house to they are saying you have powers. What did you do? Where were you when you were being beaten?
I'm not the one to protect you.
all right, let's listen to Honorable Gwang finally. No, finally, Honorable Peter Gwang will have the last
So
word.
We did not even take them to
Who
court.
deployed the forces?
We did not even take them to court. We did not even impeach the commander-in-chief. We did not even censor a minister for
Honorable
defense.
Mwanga and our senior elder.
Who do you blame here?
David, we are listening to Honorable Peter
Our
Gwang.
senior elder, who is my uncle.
Sorry.
Here we are in a national television, and we must have decorum. And this is a problem which is at Parliament. First of all, I want to make a correction with my colleague here. And of course, he likes joking with me. I am not
Conduit.
a conduit to whatever you're trying to allege here when I'm here. And I want that to be corrected. Number two, I also want to give about 2-3 issues very fast. Number one, the office of the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker are constitutional offices. So we must not just come and make statements as if these offices are small offices. No, they are. So harmony, and my low moments in the 10th Parliament is this harmony. Because we must acknowledge that there's been a problem. I have been in the Parliamentary Commission. My second low moment, we have lost quite a big number of colleagues. May their soul rest in eternal peace. My very good friend, the late Honorable Abiriga.
We're still waiting for the report on his assassination.
The second Deputy Prime Minister. I have my colleague, the counterpart of Toroma County, the woman MP of Chotera, Iganga, the woman MP of Palisa, the MP of Ruhama, the MP of Moroto, woman MP of Moroto. Those were my low moments as far as the 10th Parliament is concerned. The other low moments, of course, is a COVID pandemic, which you must appreciate now. We are sitting in terms of clusters, and I don't know how Afli is going to come up with a report.
No, we look at your Zoom, those who participate through Zoom, those who
So
who attend
these are
physically.
some, first of all, you need really to get that right, because part of the problem also, my law moment, has been Afli report. If given permission and because of time, I would have addressed myself to that in terms of how they tend to assess us. The other law moment of mine entirely in this current parliament has been...
He has an issue.
Has been in the let's talk about...
Counting a number of days.
Excuse me, Honorable Chimwanga, I want to conclude on some of
Right,
the law
if
moments.
you can finally sum up. yes, we really
I
need
was
to go.
coming in to say one of my law moments, of course, has been the constitutional amendment, specifically conduct of our colleagues in the opposition. Despite them knowing they are few, they wanted to cause, they caused confusion. My heights of the 10th Parliament, number one, which I want to go to figures. The 10th Parliament did approve 117 bills, vis-a-vis the 9th Parliament, which have passed 103 bills. So as far as bills, legislation is concerned, they have performed quite well. The second issue for me as my height was the hosting of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Conference. Here, the 64th Commonwealth Parliamentary Conference, which took place in Kampala, was the best in the history of the Commonwealth Parliament. The other one, of course, one of my heights, is the entire also on some of the probes, and I want to appreciate the committee on terms of oversight. The committee of Honorable Abdul Katuntu Kosase, they really undertook very thorough work in terms of looking. Let's talk about Bank of Uganda, audit probe. Let's talk about URA, UNRA. These are really exceptional in terms of work of Parliament, and this is what we expect Parliament to do. The other one, of course, as I conclude, was the hosting of the East African Parliamentary Games. It was also one of the high moments, and which is going to be historic. The last but not least is the construction of the new chambers.
we need to first look at the books.
I'm coming to talk about that, despite it taking long to be completed. Because to me, I was in the Parliamentary Commission. We did agree the 11th Parliament must, as of today, be sitting in that new chamber. That was the position of the Parliamentary Commission. But of course, as of now, the questions, I left the parliamentary questions 1.5 years ago. Why is the building not moving forward? That is my...
I hope you'll be kind enough to share the books.
The books, of course, it is appropriate. This is the fact.
No, we're interested in looking at
I
audited books.
I can confirm that that construction, as per the budget, was about 179 billion. That was meant, that's the 8th floor, state of the art, meant to accommodate about 600 MPs. We had all envisaged that we have kept on creating constituencies without having a provision of having a house which accommodates all. So for me, my height is we are going to get a new chambers to address issues which Honorable Chivumba has been mentioning here. Where we are now, we have gone to rent. And that still leaves a challenge to the Parliamentary Commission. But I entirely want to say thank you so much for inviting me here. Of course, there are these allegations of Honorable Chivumba saying State House, the President's budget. Please, do you want Museveni to go and sell his cows to run the country?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Honorable Peter Gwang. Thank you, Honorable Muhammad Mwanga Chifumbi. Thank you, Honorable Sarah Opendi. I think it's the first time we're having her on the front line. Really? Okay, you should come more often. And your voter, thank you for your dedication. Thank you. Thank you, David. And from me and the team, our producer, Mordecai Marisa, and technical producer, Charles Nsivira, it's a good morning. See you again on Thursday. And we are keeping our lenses on the 12th of May, the swearing in of the president. And then 21st, if it doesn't change, will be the day, I call it the day of premium tears. We'll hold 2 buckets. Either the tears will go to Omoro or to Kamuli. But we will looking forward to that. But also, Honorable Pend is playing ahead of us. She's looking at the names in heaven. Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi reminds me that we should wish the Muslims a happy end of the holy month of Ramadan. We're projecting Eid is also around the corner, around the swearing in day. And to our brothers and sisters from the Muslim community, wish you the best of the festivities. It's a good morning from me and the team here.
NBS Frontline.